I think I've been playing too much Super Smash Bros. I want to keep calling this series Shulk, although it would be easier. Shulk! What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking She-Hulk Attorney at Law. 9 episodes total, dropping on Disney Plus starting tomorrow. Is it good? I have seen 4 episodes, so I'm only going to be talking about those 4 episodes. Can't go any deeper, and this is spoiler free. Let's get into it. Jennifer Walters navigates the complicated life of a single 30-something attorney who also happens to be a green 6'7" superpowered Hulk. We do know this series is rated TV-14. They don't have the exact reason why just yet, but there's a little bit of violence in there, a couple of moments where they're talking about sexual things, suggestive material, but overall, nothing too bad. It's definitely a show that can appeal to most ages. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was nervous, really hesitant for this show. It's one of the first Marvel shows in a while that really did not appeal to me with its marketing, with its trailers. The idea is great. I think the character of She-Hulk in the comics is interesting, and the concept of making this a case of the week type show. Austin, what do you mean by that? Well, instead of this overarching plot that we're having to follow like we do in most of these Marvel series, She-Hulk is a little bit different because every single episode you're handling something. You're always going to have moments that carry over and characters that come in and out. Yeah, that's for sure, right? But this is one of the first Marvel series on Disney Plus where there isn't this one huge threat looming over at least the first 4 episodes. We're kind of handling it a week at a time. We're going to the next week and we're dealing with something new, or it carries over from one episode to the other, but get into episode 3, something entirely different. Episode 4, same thing. So that for me was interesting, and it does feel more like what television used to be. And She-Hulk says it in the first episode. This is a lawyer show. It's not a superhero show, so I had to get that out of my brain immediately, even though in the first episode, we do get some superhero moments, and those moments were actually really fun. But again, my hesitancy with this, I just didn't exactly know what the tone would be, and we'll talk about that tone. First off, I want to talk about the clear highlight of this series and what kept it afloat at times when I was really struggling with the story, because there are story beats here that I'm wondering where they're going. I'm struggling with as we're going through them. We'll get into that. Tatiana Maslany, the perfect casting choice. I just think she's great. She works in the role. She's someone who is hesitant, doesn't want to be in the situation that she's in, like a lot of superheroes, right? But I like what the first episode did. It gave us a bit of that dynamic between she and another character. And I don't want to spoil what the first episode is all about, but there's like a 25-minute span of some really cool things in that first episode involving training, kind of honing in her newfound powers that I actually thought was really interesting. Not the direction that I thought this series would go. And post episode 1, it's no longer doing things like that, but in that moment, I was really enjoying it. I liked the fact that they gave her time to figure everything out. Even if it didn't fully come to realization by the end of the episode, it's nice to see that they were kind of focusing on her character specifically. So whether it be her playing off of others with that chemistry or just on screen by herself, she's really good. Then you have the fourth wall breaking, and conceptually, I think that's a great idea. Obviously, you're bringing in the comics at that point. Comic book fans are going to be happy. But at the end of the day, if you've watched TikTok, you know that guy that says at the end of the day. And every time I say at the end of the day, but there were some awkward moments that came from the fourth wall breaking. I think for the most part, it works. And there are 1 or 2 jokes in there that I thoroughly enjoyed. She's telling the audience, hey, there are going to be things that you're going to enjoy, but always keep it focused on the lawyer part of the show. And that really is the focus, so I do appreciate that. But there were some other fourth wall breaking moments that just felt kind of awkward. And I don't know if they nailed what they were trying to go for. And a lot of it is more so the writing and less so the performances. There may be a performance or 2 in there that I'm not entirely a fan of, but when it comes down to the way this show is being handled in terms of comedy balanced with a little bit of drama, but mostly comedy. Some of those comedy beats are not working as we're going, and they're making for somewhat awkward situations. And as someone who didn't fully respond to those situations, I was like, okay, well, I'm not laughing. I'm supposed to be laughing. So this moment is just a bit, let's just move on. Can we go to the next scene? And you don't want to feel that way when you're watching a show. I think the charm that's coming from our main character helps those situations, but I was worried that I was going to feel that way just from the trailers and the comedy that came from that, and that probably is my biggest issue, is just some of these jokes and gags and full situations with characters that continue all throughout one specific episode. They just didn't work for me. And when it takes up an entire episode, sure, the next episode may be great, but when you kind of waste an entire storyline there, a 28 to 30 minute episode, that did kind of bother me as we were going. And that was my hesitancy at the start, along with the visual effects. Now, I was extremely nervous, but I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt because that very first trailer, we started to see more versions of that trailer or more trailers where the VFX were so much better. Still not great, but they were better. And I'm happy to say that while it was a little up and down, a little inconsistent, they surprised me. They look better than I anticipated, especially in that first episode. Now, of course, there are going to be moments that don't quite work. One in particular where she's talking to a newscaster and she herself is in front of a very clear green screen, but that's what it's supposed to be like because she's on a local news channel. That looks pretty bad. But there were other moments where I said, you know what? It does look like they spent so much more time on the CGI, on the visual effects. So it allowed her to feel more realistic, and I appreciate that. So my biggest fear turned out to be something that I was pretty okay with. And going back to the point I made earlier with the case of the week type situations, whenever it's a case involving her, right, there are one or two subplots in here that are following different cases that I just wasn't as intrigued by. It ties in, and they let us know that it ties in, but I wanted to see her on screen becoming or continuing to become that lawyer that we know and love from her character in the comics, and those were the moments that I really enjoyed. And also the struggle of becoming someone with these powers, right? Understanding that you now have a responsibility that is so much different than what you had before. And those ideas, when they're handled with that emotional balance that does have that comedy in there, but also brings in other elements, that was really nice to see. Her character does grow and develop throughout the first 4 episodes. Now, if you're looking for something with a ton of action, then this is not going to be the show for you, right? You get it in the first episode. 2 through 4, not as much. Now, that didn't bother me because it does really feel more like a lawyer show, and you're gonna get a lot to love from the MCU, whether it be characters, references, situations, and they never felt shoehorned. The fan service isn't in here just for the sake of fan service, and that's another huge positive from me. So again, there's a lot to enjoy in this show, and that's why I use the word fun, because it's a fun little series, and it at least knows what it's trying to do. Does it fully accomplish that in the first 4 episodes? I'm not entirely sure. I need to see how the last 5 continue to handle this character, and whether or not they come back to one specific plot point that's really bugging me right now, and I can't say what it is, and maybe I'll talk about it with the individual episodes, but they start to do things with characters that I just wasn't all that happy with. And maybe this is just a personal thing, and again, if you really enjoyed the trailers, you're going to love the tone of this show, and maybe you're going to be okay with how they handled certain characters, but there's one character in particular I'm not going to say, but the way that this character is handled, I'm just thinking to myself, I don't love how they're handling this. And there is a way this could change in the final 5 episodes. So we could come back at the end of this series when I'm finally able to talk about it, and I'll look at you all and say, okay, it's all right. They were just going for something, and it did not play out in the way that I expected it to, and I'm pretty happy. But as of now, after 4 episodes, the way that this character is handled, I'm thinking, I just don't love what they did because it's such a drastic tonal shift, not the show, but with one specific plot point that I'm not all that happy with, especially when you look at where we came from and where we are now. So That bothered me. The inclusion of other characters, that was pretty cool to see. So where are fans going to fall with this series? You have those that have traveled to the future and apparently already watched it. Here's IMDb. It's not come out yet. There's no way they could have seen it, but look at all those 1s and 10s. This is why I don't use IMDb anymore. It's just so stupid. If you love the trailers and the tone they're going for, I think you're really going to dig it. I love what they did with her character. I do think there are some things to really enjoy in this series. The story is something I'm still struggling with. I can't come down to a final verdict yet. It's only 4 episodes. Less than half of what well, I guess 4.5 would be half, so... But yeah, it's going to be less than half. I just have to see how it plays out. It's like watching half a movie and then giving your final verdict. I don't want to do that. But as of now, Tatiana Maslany is fantastic. The tone is lighthearted, fun, and comic accurate. The series ties in well with the MCU. My issues come down to a few of the subplots not working, and the comedy just isn't truly landing consistently. It lands every now and then. I'm holding out to see what they do with one specific plot point, so I don't want to say I'm right down the middle on this series. I had way more fun than I anticipated to have, so in that way, it was a surprise, so I guess I'm leaning in the good direction, but I definitely want more in the next batch of episodes, so we will just see what they do, but I need your thoughts down below. How are you feeling about She-Hulk Attorney at Law? Is this a show that you are looking forward to? Thank you all for everything you do. Thanks for dropping that like and leaving those comments. See you soon.